Hi guys, Jen and Adam here with PepperHarrow Farm.
We're here today to teach you how to make your own seasonal wreath. So the first step to making your own seasonal wreath is using a wire base, which we have shown here. We take this metal frame and we then take it and we cover it with a little bit of Spanish moss, as you can see here. We just take the Spanish moss and we use paddle wire and paddle wire it all the way around. This just gives the materials that we're going to be using today a little bit of something to adhere to, and it tends to give wreaths a fuller look to them, and it also makes sure, we were kind of talking about having something for it to hold on to. When you go to hang your wreath up on your door, it makes sure that none of your greenery is going to flop over. So these are the materials we like to use, and you can see that wire product is on the other side, so you can see it from the other side. This is how we create the base of our wreath. So the first thing we start with is to take a little bit more paddle wire, and we just take the end of the paddle wire, and we just wrap it a couple times to begin our wreath. So I have it on here, I'm ready to begin. I tend to make my wire on the inside and then I wrap to the outside. It doesn't matter how you do it, whatever is to your preference. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick, I think we want to do the blue wreath today, right? Mm-hmm. So one of our favorite things for this season was to create a blue wreath, which just has a lot of seasonal ingredients. Lavender from our farm. We're using Douglas fir as kind of the base of our wreath. Douglas fir was one of our favorite fillers for this year.
Forged pine.
Yeah, white pine. So what we like to do is we like to go ahead and grab just a few different kinds of greenery. So I'm using the fir as my base, and I'm putting some of the pine on top.
So I always describe this to people like making a little greenery bouquet.
Yeah, so I started by laying 3 different pieces of fir on the bottom. I have 2 pieces of white pine on top. And now I'm going to pick the special things that I want to put in to add a little sparkle to my wreath. And I think to start, I'm going to go ahead and grab a piece of lavender and a piece of, and a piece of eucalyptus. So I may just leave it at that, just 1 piece of lavender and 1 piece of eucalyptus just to start out, just to see how it looks. I'm going to put 1 more piece of lavender in. I just love the gray look lavender gives, and I love the fragrance it adds to the wreath as well as that eucalyptus. So when placing your first bunch on your wreath, you want to make sure that you don't put the wire too low on your bunch that you're getting ready to put on.
Yeah, so you're going to be looking to wrap it about 1/3 of the way up.
Like so.
Got there?
Yeah. So I'll lift it up and we'll show. Might be good to get an overhead shot of this particular part. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you can see with my first bunch, I didn't put it all the way on the bottom of the wreath. I put it up 1/3 of the way. That's going to make sure that your bunch lays flat and doesn't flop over once you go to hang it up on your door like we talked about. So the first bunch is on, and you do not cut the wire. You leave the wire on. We're going to go around the entire wreath leaving the same paddle wire on without cutting the wire to make our separate bunches. So now that our first bunch is placed, we're going to get ready to put our second bunch on, and I really like how you said it was like making a little bouquet. I tend to explain to people it's like making a fan. It should be splayed out, and I'll show that as we make our third little bunch here. I'm going to grab 3 little additional pieces of the fir, and I'm fanning them out. So my first one usually goes straight up and down. 1 comes out to the side, it kind of flopped over on me. And then the third one goes out this way. So we have straight out, 1 this way and 1 that way, and it makes a fan. Okay, that got stuck in my hair. So it makes a little fan. Okay, I have my 3 pieces of fir, and I'm going to go ahead and put on my 3 pieces, or my couple pieces of pine. We love the way the pine looks. It gives a light and airy effect to any seasonal wreath. Looks really beautiful.
And you're keeping your recipe consistent.
Correct.
Except for your highlights. Are you going to put something different in?
Yeah, so as part of this blue wreath, I'm going to also include in these beautiful locally gathered feathers that we got from a friend's farm. They have peacocks.
Yeah.
A lot of peacocks.
A lot of peacocks.
So they share their feathers with us. So we're going to add in these beautiful blue feathers because they add to the blue effect of the wreath. We had the gray from the lavender and some of the green from the eucalyptus, and now we're going to put in these little blue elements. So I'm just going to add a couple feathers in. I don't want to get too crazy with the feathers. I don't want them to be too distracting in this wreath. They're very eye-catching and beautiful, but I don't want to go too crazy. So I put my 2 feathers in my bunch. I just put 2 feathers, 2 different types. I put one of the eyes and one of the side feathers in, which is great.
Are you going to put any lavender or eucalyptus in there?
I don't think so. For this bunch, I'm just going to go with the feathers. For my next bunch, I'll probably put in some more lavender and eucalyptus. So I'm going to go, so for your second bunch, you just need to be cognizant of where you place it. We've had people put them either too low or too high. If you place your bunch too high on top of the one that you set on before, you'll start to get bigger and bigger and bigger as you go along with your wreath. And if you put them too low, when you go to hang it up, you'll see that you've left a giant gaping hole. So we want to make sure that it's just layered really nicely on top and that there's not any kind of amount of hole left. And then we're still going to take that bunch and we're going to wrap it 3/4 of the way up. I'm just adjusting my feathers a little bit to make sure that they don't flop over and go in a different direction. So I'm pulling my paddle wire probably catty corner down the wreath to be able to wrap my next bunch. And I'm going to wrap it around. I usually do it a little bit lightly the first time, the first rotation around when I'm wrapping the wire. But then on the second and the third time around, I do it a little bit tighter to make sure that that greenery bunch isn't going to fall over once I hang it up. All right, so that was my third. I do come and I trim off any of the end pieces that get too big. I like to make sure that it's not going to get too crazy and out of control. So I trimmed off what I call my little tails off of my wreath, and I'm going to go ahead and keep making my bunches. So the next bunch, again, I'm going to grab 3 pieces of the fur. And for this one, I'm going to keep up my recipe that I have going, and I'm going to put my eucalyptus and some of my lavender after I get my pine in.
So we'll just continue this pattern for the rest of the wreath.
So we're almost done with our seasonal wreath. You can see it's looking gorgeous already. The mistake people generally make when they get to the end of their wreath, like we are here, is that they think, oh, I have one more bundle that needs to go in. And actually I look at this and I know it needs a couple bundles, right? That's always the #1 question. People think when they get here that there's just one more that needs to go in there. That's not the case. There's 2. So I'm going to make 2 more bundles. I'm going to put one kind of right here. It's going to lay over the top up here. And then the last one actually will get pushed under this first bundle that I originally put on. You're going to have to kind of push it down under the bundle a little bit. And then it gets tricky with putting the last bit of paddle wire on because you have to have someone or yourself hold up this first bunch up a little bit so that you can get the paddle wire in to be able to secure it in place. Okay, so I'm going to make my last 2 bundles. All right, ready for that last bunch. Let's take a peek. All right.
Wow, it does need another bunch.
I know. I'm always right, don't you know this? Oh, I just need one more good one here. Where is it? Come to mama. Okay, so we're gonna end this up with feathers. So Adam actually had a really great idea. For the last bunch, since we need to take it and kind of put it under that first bundle, it's usually a little bit easier to cut your little bouquet all the way down. So I'm just trimming off some of the branches and things to try to make it a little bit more manageable. So I made this a little bit smaller so that I can take the ends and kind of shove it under that first piece. So I'm going to lift up my first little bundle that I laid, all the pieces there, and it leaves my little hole. And I'm going to take the last bunch and kind of shove it in there a little bit. It's a little bit difficult to get it in, but
A little bit. Need help?
No, I got it. Oh, I forgot of course I forgot a piece. That's okay. Got one of these guys. We're just going to trim it down and stick it in there. The princess pine, or the white pine actually, we forgot that. So I'm just taking that and I'm going to shove that in there too. All right, so usually it works better for us if Adam holds this first bunch up. Otherwise, you kind of run the risk of getting your first bunch trapped in the paddle wire for this last bunch that you're wrapping. And it's very easy to do that when you're making a wreath.
True.
Uh-huh. All right, so I wrapped it in. All right, it's working out. Just have to take this last part slow and easy. Don't get too ahead of yourself. Relax a little bit. Okay.
Have a glass of wine.
It's perfect. It's perfect. So, there we go. All right. So, I have that last little bundle all roped in and ready to go. I still have my paddle wire attached. So, I'm just going to flip this wreath completely over on the front. Stop it. And I'm going to ask Adam to help me cut this little bit of wire off. And never use your clippers to clip wire. Only use special wire cutters. I can't say I've ever been guilty of doing that, but don't use your good clippers to cut wire. Only use special wire cutters. So I'm just going to take this last little piece, and I guess you could actually create your own little loop here. We take it and we usually just try to find a little piece of wire that we had originally started our wreath with and kind of rope it in and make a little knot. So I'm just going to tuck it under the wire that we had in there before. It's coming out here. There we go. And then I just kind of pick a piece of greenery and I wrap it around that and make sure at the end that the end piece is tucked into my wreath so that it doesn't scratch my door or any of the customers' doors that I'm selling my wreaths to. So that's all tucked in and ready to go. Okay, so usually the last step that we do with doing our seasonal wreaths
Is?
Oh, do you want me to just say it? Okay.
Oh, I don't even know what you're going to say.
Okay. So our seasonal wreath is complete. You can see how gorgeous and luxurious it looks. The last thing we usually do is try to figure out which side we want to be on top. So we will usually take this and go hang it up on a nail inside of our barn and kind of flip it around and see which side looks best. Where should the top be? Where should the bottom be? If there's any little mistakes that we made while we were making our wreath, usually that's where we put the bow. Give yourself some credit. Sometimes bows can solve and fix everything. So if you see that you've left a little bit of a hole, you can go back and that's where you would be able to put your bow. And maybe that's either the bottom or the side of your wreath or the top. You have to decide that.
So don't panic if there's a hole.
Right, don't panic. It's okay, it can be fixed. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciated you listening along and learning how to make a seasonal wreath of your very own.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.